Okay, hello. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. Today we are fortunate to have the Director of the Bureau of Forestry, Ellen Shultzabarger, with us, and the Director of the Bureau of State Parks, John Hallas. As in past Lunch and Learns, if you have a question, feel free to post it, and I will moderate those questions to our presenters. And feel free to invite others to join you in watching the presentation. Hopefully you're all comfortable. It seems like we went from spring to super hot summer. and spending some time outdoors this weekend might be very welcomed. So Ellen and John, thank you for being with us here today. I appreciate you giving us your time. I'd like to start, we at the Pennsylvania Parks and Forest Foundation are celebrating Pennsylvania Park and Forest Week. It was kind of launched 2 years ago with the 125th anniversary of the signing of the legislation that created the Forestry Commission and the acquisition of the first state park. So Ellen, I'm going to direct the question to you. I know that the first land acquisition wasn't that same year, but the Bureau, I think, is celebrating their 125th anniversary this year.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, so this was the year that the Bureau actually formed, and our first acquisition was up in the Sproul State Forest, actually in July. So we're coming up on, really that 125th. So it was pretty exciting for us to start planning that this year. Things have been a little wonky with COVID-19, but we're looking forward to getting back into some way to celebrate it. We were looking at doing some events across all of the state forests. And so, now we have to make some adjustments here and see how we can plan and celebrate not just the Bureau, but celebrate the Commonwealth's forests and the value and the importance of these resources across Penn's Woods. So yeah, very exciting year.
Excellent. So you had that, oh, there we're seeing the monument to the first acquisition. So you had that first acquisition 125 years ago in July. How many acres of state forest do you have today? What are we talking about when we talk about Pennsylvania's state forest?
Yeah, 2.2 million acres. So certainly the first million was pretty quick within the Bureau's acquisitions, but slowly we've been adding some great sites across Pennsylvania, and it is pretty amazing to know, well, first of all, our public resources as a whole that we have in Pennsylvania. But for us, it's a pretty large state forest system if you compare it to other states, and a lot of values and resources. All there's a big north central part, but it is scattered across Pennsylvania. So it's great to have such a large system. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, we're fortunate in Pennsylvania to have access to that amazing system. Mm-hmm. And while we're talking about systems, John, it's 127th anniversary of Pennsylvania State Parks. My trivia question that I often ask when I'm doing a presentation is, what was Pennsylvania's first state park?
Valley Forge.
Excellent, excellent. So, tell us a little bit about where parks have come in the past 127 years.
Sure. And in 1893, Valley Forge was brought in as the first Pennsylvania state park. And of course, on the bicentennial, it was a gift to the nation that the Commonwealth conveyed that to the federal government to become a national unit within the National Park Service. Since then, obviously, a lot has happened with 121 state parks. And our history of adding parks was relatively modest at first as we entered the 20th century. And I always like to key in on, because it's my focal point, the Doc Goddard era, where we essentially doubled the size of our park system during his time as secretary. And our latest addition to Pennsylvania State Parks was at one time managed and administered under the old Department of Forests and Waters, but then it was administered by the Pennsylvania Historic Museum Commission until it came to us in 2015, Washington Crossing. That became our 121st state park in our system.
That's amazing. And I think one of the things that makes us really stand out from many other states is our park and forest system is free admission and free parking. So do you see that as a benefit to Pennsylvanians?
Absolutely. And I think it's one of those things within the Environmental Rights Amendment that specify that our citizens have the right to those resources, those public lands. and to their qualities. So that we're one of only, I think, 6 at this time systems in the country that is still free for admission and no parking fees is significant and important for the citizens of the Commonwealth.
So what is the value of this 2.5 million acre park and forest system? What is the value to the people of the Commonwealth? What is the value to the Commonwealth in general? Either one of you.
I'll jump in, and then Ellen can certainly chime in since she has the lion's share of the acreage. With parks, we're nearly 300,000 acres. With some very important acquisitions that we hope to be making in the near future, will be over 300,000 acres. And you know, for me, parks goes back to my childhood, like many people that were exposed to parks, and you know, the aesthetic qualities, the recreational value, the physical and mental health that one gains by being in a park environment. It's invaluable, and I think particularly during the COVID emergency that we're all experiencing, they have proven that significantly. Our public has flocked to the parks in greater numbers during the spring season than ever seen before in the Commonwealth, and it speaks to those values and the importance to everyone's well-being and way of life in Pennsylvania that parks and forests and our public lands overall provide.
Yeah, and you know, and I second John, but it certainly over the past few weeks, we have really seen the value that getting outdoors can really have on folks. And it has been amazing that we have so many opportunities to do that. I think things would be different if we were one of those states where you would be paying to get into those systems. But you know, having these free open systems is just a testament to how important these outdoor areas are to us here in Pennsylvania. And what is kind of neat is that ability to go to you know, maybe a park where you have some more concentrated or easier trails straight out into the forest where you've got these big open dispersed areas of recreation. So not only do we have this opportunity, but we have the opportunity to have so many different types of, and I see we have this Get Healthy Outdoors. I mean, you can go and feel like you're in the middle of nowhere pretty easily here in Pennsylvania. And I think that's a great thing. And having, you know, more than 2.5 million acres to do that on is just spectacular. And I think people are getting out there. You know, I've seen people posting on Instagram or Facebook that you never knew actually went out, and you know, your friends from the neighborhood. I didn't know that they ever hiked, and I don't know that they did, but now they're getting out and seeing those values, and it's great to see. Really is.
Yeah. I just add that I think it was important to note for Pennsylvania, for the Commonwealth, that during the COVID emergency, we did not close our gates. We left our public lands open for dispersed and passive recreation, and there was certainly a need and a demand there. And Pennsylvania State Parks and Forests were able to fill that need.
Yeah, and I understand you're seeing quite an uptick in the use in both parks and forests. And I think, Ellen, you made a very good point. Sometimes when you go to a park, it might be congested, but many of our parks are surrounded by state forests. And if you maybe go a little bit further, you can find a trailhead that isn't quite as overcrowded, and you can find other trails in which you can engage. So if somebody's looking for information about a park or a forest, you know, what's their best resource?
Certainly the DCNR website. You can get all of the information about parks and forests, but we also have that website that provides information on what is open or closed. And I'll let John get into the details of those open and closed things. Mostly the forest is open. It's, you know, we don't have cabins and things like park has as far as the reservation system. So this website that's up right now actually goes through, and you can easily see what things are available county by county. It's pretty nice to look at that before you head out.
I give kudos to our communications team and our staff at DCNR that worked with the Bureau of State Parks and Bureau of Forestry to get the information loaded onto this county map, so you can see precisely what facilities are open. It's been, to say the least, a complex reopening process for our facilities and amenities and services that we provide. So this map really helps. It's a one-stop shop, so to speak, and it really helps people see in the different phases of the Commonwealth's reopening plan, be it red, yellow, or green, what's available for their use.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, this is an amazing resource. So Pam is running the URL there. If you haven't been to it, and if you're planning to head out this weekend or at any point in time, check the resource first, check the website first, and it'll give you information that'll be helpful. We at PPFF often get the question, what's the difference between a park and a forest? And oftentimes people don't know whether or not they're in a park or a forest, because they know they're out enjoying these great places and this wonderful system that we have. So can you share a little bit with the listeners what the difference between a park and a forest is?
Do you want to start, Ellen, and then I'll follow up? Okay.
Yeah, sure. And that's a very good question. I think a lot of times people don't know what kind of land they're on. Is it game commission?
Right.
Is it, so it is important that folks are out and enjoying those spaces. But yeah, generally you could say the difference between the park and forest is the park would have more of those concentrated recreation experiences, either around a certain trail or a beach or, whatever it is. As far as the forest, it is usually a larger block, and it has management for multiple resources. So we may have areas that are managed for, timber, and then some trails that are found within that. Or then we have some sites that are pretty heavily managed as a recreation site. So there's a lot of diversity in the state forest system, and is getting more diverse as the years go. But generally, it's a larger landscape with a lot of different values and uses that we're managing for. But you're going to get a more dispersed recreation experience. Not in all areas. Like if you look at the Pinchot State Forest, we have a 7 Tubs area, and that's pretty heavily used, and it's kind of state park-like. So you will see those differences, but generally it is that larger dispersed recreation experience.
Great.
I'll add early 20th century great promoter of state parks from the state of Indiana. His name is Colonel Lieberman. Said, I know a park when I see it. And I would echo those comments. And Ellen was right. We have concentrated recreation in our.
Bye.
We have concentrated and heavy use in our state parks, and those elements require a higher level of service and amenities to accommodate those crowds and to safely manage folks that are coming to enjoy the resource. But those facilities at the end of the day are really the front porch, so to speak, the entrance to those natural resources that the park is there to provide for and protect. And so, yeah, we may have heavier use, but my early experiences in the Forbes, because I'm from Western Pennsylvania, and times I didn't know as a young child whether I was in the forest or on one of the state parks that's embedded in that forest.
Yes, and you point out, Ellen, we have Pennsylvania game lands, we have Fish and Boat Commission lands, and there are some overlaps because you may transition from a park into a forest into a game land, or there might, DCNR works closely with the Fish and Boat Commission with lake access, but so.
Yeah, and I think, and I think that's okay that folks aren't sure if they're in a park or a forest. At least for us, John and I work really hard to make sure there's consistency among management across parks and forests, and I grew up in the South Mountain area, so I was running around the Michaud, or was I in Caledonia? I don't know. But it didn't matter to me. I was outside and running around, and hopefully folks are enjoying those spaces, even if they start from a park and go into a forest or vice versa.
Agreed. So, one of the things that I've read is that that there are actually more folks hunting and engaging in traditional sports in state forests. I would imagine with 2.2 million acres of land, and I know that hunting is permitted in state parks as well. Is that a viable thing to say, that it's a very popular form of recreation in the state forest as well as in some of the state parks.
Absolutely. In state parks, it's one of those traditional recreational uses that we welcome and that we need from a resource management standpoint. And over 80% of our ground, of our 300,000 acres, is open to hunting.
Yeah, and yes, it is a very popular use of the state forest, and it is certainly welcomed. And we manage for all types of recreation uses, and that is one that we work very closely with the Game Commission or others on opportunities to provide appropriate or increase habitat opportunities in certain areas. So yeah, that's a
great.
Good information piece. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good information piece that's available on the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources website. So parks are starting to unroll. John referred to it a little bit. It's a hot day today. People are going to be thinking about, sorry, John, to put you on the spot, they're going to be thinking about access to water.
Sure.
So what is the current plan as it relates to beaches and swimming pools and ways to get relief from, I keep looking out my window, from the heat?
So with the governor's and Department of Health's guidance that came out last week, the determination was made that in the Commonwealth's reopening plan, the public bathing places, which covers our pools and our beaches, will be allowed in the yellow phase and green phase, obviously, which is a more relaxed stature. So our plan right now is to open up all of our beaches. We have 58 of them statewide on June 6th. And most of our beaches are open swim. The beaches at Presque Isle and one beach at Fuller Lake at Pine Grove Furnace have lifeguards. And so with lifeguarding, there's additional complexity to the operation. But all of the operational requirements for swimming for our beaches will be met by June 6th. And Saturday, those beaches will be open. Pools are going to take us a little bit longer. I think, for the emergency, we've been monitoring both statewide as well as nationally the additional operational challenges associated with pools. And we are, because of our ability to operate, we're making every effort to bring our pools back online. And I believe we have an opening for most of our pools in the northern tier, as well as western portion of the state and south central by June 13th. And then in the east, we have our pools both in the northeast and southeast. We're planning to open, should we get all the guards required to operate safely by June 20th. That's the plan right now. Makes it a little more challenging with the staffing and hiring that we have to go through in very short order for the pools. But certainly for our 58 beaches, we're welcoming folks to come in and pull off. It is a hot one today in south central Pennsylvania, so I know there'll be people across the state looking to get to the water as soon as possible.
Absolutely. So if you're a certified lifeguard and you're interested in working for the state park system, is there a place that people should go to look to get information?
The civil service site, but I also always recommend the local contact is best to people and qualified guards that live around the state park that has a swimming pool, or if they're in and around Pine Grove and they're looking, because we have guard needs there as well, they should contact the park as soon as possible, and we'll put them on the path to becoming a state parks lifeguard. I know the Secretary Dunn is making a pitch for that today. We are in need of guards. It's not a Pennsylvania State Park need alone. Municipalities as well as other locations across the country are short lifeguards. But we certainly are encouraging folks to make outreach if they're interested in a lifeguard job.
Excellent. There we go.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe Pam, we can put that link in the comment section box as well for people. I think one of the beautiful things about Pennsylvania and the fact that we have so many trees is that if you get to a park or a forest, oftentimes just being in that place helps to reduce the temperature a little bit. You can feel the coolness of the shade, and just being around the trees can make you feel just a little bit less stressed and a little bit cooler.
Yes, for sure. And there's all kinds of, not only do you feel it, but there's all kinds of data and information that shows those positive effects of not only looking and being surrounded by trees, but those environmental benefits that they play. Certainly, if you're in a urban setting, going out and being in that area where there is a reduced temperature, and if you're stream side or something like that, it certainly can make you feel a little bit better. That's for sure.
Yes.
And just to add, when John was talking about getting to the certain pools, or even when you're going back to that COVID website, what's open county by county, it is good to have a plan of, maybe 3 areas that you want to go to, because you could show up to the one site and it might be a little bit busier than what you're looking for. And I know, at least for me and my family, we like the more away from people and a little more on our own recreation situations. So it is always good to have a plan for where you want to go, and if things are a little busier than what you're looking for, you have another option. Or sometimes the trail parking lots are just jam packed, and so not only are they being used, but they're being heavily used right now. So it's something to keep in mind before you head out.
That's great advice. Have several things in your back pocket, so in case you
Right.
arrive and you can't get into a particular park because it's full, you have another place that you can go. Great idea. John, I thought you were going to add something.
Yeah, you and Ellen spoke wonderfully about the power of trees and our escape from the heat. And I would just add to that both in parks and forests, oftentimes it's the trees coupled with the elevation that you could gain in a park or forest with the water resource nearby that really makes it an optimal situation to get out and enjoy nature. And
it's not a bad place to be. I'm going to reach down here. Just started reading The Hidden Life of Trees.
Great book.
Yeah, we're going to discuss it at book club, so I'm looking forward to it. So, you mentioned, like, in terms of people, the value of trees. Can we talk a little bit about the value of trees from a water perspective? We're looking at some potential heavy rain this weekend. What value do our parks and our forests bring when we have these heavy rains? And then what are some of the impacts that are happening to our parks and the forests when we have heavy rains, which we seem to be having more and more large-scale storm systems?
Yeah, great question. So, the trees and the forest provide a lot of stability and protection to these watersheds. Everybody sees those streams and after those heavy rain events, and they're kind of a chocolate milk, brown, muddy brown color. And in those areas where you're building that support with trees or even meadows along the buffers of the stream systems, they bring great benefit of not only just filtering the water, but providing that structure to reduce that heavy flow as it's going. And that is something that we've been looking at within Parks and Forests, is how we can make those improvements within state parks and state forests with certain plantings, how we can be planning for culvert size to improve the flow and not have those impediments to basically causing more E&S issues. So that's a lot of the planning that we have in our climate change adaptation and mitigation plan. We're working through those ways that we can increase or decrease the impacts that these huge flooding events have been having in those areas. And so we're making sure that we are sizing things appropriately, or putting those plantings in where we can. And we're also even doing the planting side on private land as well, with a lot of the riparian forest buffer efforts. But yeah, they play a critical role in these watershed or stream side systems for sure.
Yeah.
And I'll just add on that, and Ellen made the points for both forestry and parks, and she mentioned the climate change adaptation plan, and with water in our parks and forests, but particularly because of the amount of infrastructure we have in our parks, how we plan and then execute to slow the flow as well as infiltrate it is ideal. Oftentimes in the past, you'll see stormwater being channeled and it's moving fast, and ultimately during major storm events, it's causing damage. But in our planning and our design, to adequately slow that flow and then move it to points of infiltration is optimal, and that's what we're gearing towards in our plans.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, as Pam brought up the value of trees infographic, one thing that popped into my mind is we do get some questions periodically in our parks and forests. People are seeing ash trees coming down. Can we talk a little bit about why people are seeing the ash trees being removed from our state parks and in some cases in very public areas of the state forest?
Sure. Yes, across the state, you'll see ash trees coming down, or you'll at least see a lot of dying ash, and that's from the emerald ash borer. And so essentially that pest kills the tree completely. And so either the trees have to come out or they're going to die. If you see some properties where there's just a lot of standing dead ash, the goal is to try and get those out of there, either that they can be economically viable on the timber side, or that then safety-wise you want to reduce that effect from those dead and dying trees. And so we are going through a process of treating those rare ash species that are found around the state, and treating some areas. We are maintaining the ash component, but generally you're removing those to ensure that they either can be used commercially or through the timber side of things, or aren't providing a safety hazard.
And how would you define a rare ash?
Oh, so like pumpkin ash, or those ash species that aren't found, more commonly across the Commonwealth.
I'll add that, and Ellen and I were just talking about an ash salvage on a previous call. I was mentioning the forestry was providing for state parks. Ash is particularly dangerous and poses a threat to public safety. And in densely used day use areas, we've had to remove the ash. And I know it's been shocking for people that don't necessarily understand the threats that ash poses and the challenge that we've had in Pennsylvania with emerald ash borer. But as we remove them, though, we're looking at doing appropriate replantings in our day use areas to eventually gain that canopy back that's needed.
Excellent.
Yeah, and this is an example of the importance of having a diversity of species. So if you go to some areas that are not even just a forested system, but here's a picture. It's often used in urban or suburban areas, and so some communities are going through some major removals. And had those areas had a diversity, it would not have impacted as heavily. But when in the future, when you're thinking about putting some plantings on your site, it's just making sure that you have a diversity of species. So then when there is a pest or an issue or disease that comes through, you're not losing your entire forested area, and that has less of an impact on your landscape. But there are some areas that you're really seeing some issues.
Yes. We had a question. You mentioned ENS. Can you define what you mean?
Sorry. Everybody always uses acronyms, huh? It's erosion and sedimentation. So, when you're talking about the stream flow and the impacts of having bringing that sediment along in the watershed, that's erosion and sedimentation issues. And so you can control that ENS, or erosion and sedimentation, by supporting it through plantings, either through trees or other grasses or other native plant species.
Excellent. And what about this is unrelated to that. It was another question that popped up. We talked about beaches, but another thing that people like to do is get out and boat. All the boating is back on board, I understand, and both are, even if it's in a state forest, boat launch in state parks.
Yes, so we never throughout the emergency this spring. Boating access was not blocked in any way. Our marina facilities were closed, but at the very beginning, when the first counties in north central, northwest went yellow, at that same time, we opened up marinas statewide with limitations, obviously, for safety and with CDC, Department of Health guidance in place. But we recognized that not only was that land-based recreation needed for passive and dispersed use, but being on the water was critical, and people could do it safely and social distance and get out. Now that we're pretty much in full swing with facilities open, we're offering boating recreation across the spectrum, including boat rentals, as well as whitewater boating in our 3 designated whitewater parks in the Commonwealth.
Excellent. 3 designated whitewater. Okay.
So
You got me.
Lehigh Gorge, and obviously where we have commercial operations, in Ohio Powell and the Yauk. And do you know the third, Marcy? Can you pull that one out? I'll give you a question.
The only other place that I could think where there'd be some whitewater is there's a little bit of whitewater up on the Pine Creek Gorge, but
that's not one of our designated ones. The other designated park in the system is Slippery Rock.
Oh, yes. I should have known that because I have an avid whitewater kayaker in the family, and he keeps telling me that's one of his goals. He wants to go do that one. So, yes.
It's a great one. It's a nice one. Intimate. Yes. I call it an intimate whitewater experience. A little bit smaller water than the Lehigh and the Yauk, but a lovely gorge to go through.
Yes, very stunning. And you got me. That's good. Now I got another little trivia for in my back pocket. So I know that the park system started their planning process, Penn's Parks for All, and I know that forestry is getting into their planning process. John, since you're further along, can you talk a little bit about where things are? Because I know a lot of our park and forest enthusiasts may have participated in one of the surveys. And then Ellen, when he's finished, if you could talk a little bit about what the forestry's plan is, that would be very helpful.
Sure. And I always like that when I'm speaking about Penn's Parks for All and our strategic plan, I like to lead in with it was really Secretary Dunn's call to action to the Bureau of State Parks to advance a new strategic plan. It had been more than a generation, over 25 years since State Park 2000 was released in February, I believe, 1993. And Secretary Dunn recognized at the start of her tenure that it was really time to touch base with the public again and get a sense of the demands of recreation and the use of our facilities and chart a course for the next generation. So we started about 3 years ago, lifting up Penn's Parks for All, our next strategic plan. We went through a very detailed public survey process and stakeholder engagement. Our Division of Resource Management and Planning took the lead in that process. Paul Zeff, who's our chief planner, was a lead, and he presented at many stakeholder events across the state. We've worked with our strong partner, our contractor, Penn State, to do the surveys for the public. We received a little over 15,000 surveys across the board. There were both web-based surveys, direct surveys, as well as some statistical surveys to flesh out our data. We released our preliminary report in the fall of 19 for feedback, and there were some recommendations in there to gain some feedback from the public as well as stakeholders on over the winter months. We've received all of that. We finished that, and we're going towards the finish line right now. And we hope to have a final report, Penn's Parks for All, this fall, before the end of the calendar year, certainly.
Excellent. And how will the public be able to see that? Will that be up on the website once it's released, that they can see what the plan is for the next 20, 25 years? Absolutely.
We'll distribute far and wide, and web-based distribution is the easy lift for us. So we'll get that out there first. And we want to share it far and wide. We've received really positive input and detailed input on our preliminary report. And again, we'll be taking that information and crafting those final recommendations.
I imagine it's a lot to sort through and digest.
Yes. What I've learned in this process is people expect a lot out of their park system in Pennsylvania, and balancing all of those various needs with the mandate and the stewardship responsibility that we have is going to be the goal. But we're getting there.
Excellent. Look forward to seeing it. Ellen, how about the Bureau of Forestry? I know they're starting their process.
Yep, and I'm gonna do a quick little explanation. So we manage the state forest system, but we also have responsibility for the Commonwealth's forests and conserving native wild plants statewide. So we have a couple different plans, and I want to at least just mention that our state forest resource management plan was last updated maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So that one was specific to state forest lands. The plan that we're working on now is we actually have two, and one is the State Forest Action Plan, and that encompasses the Commonwealth's forests, and that's a requirement that we have similar to the Wildlife Action Plan or the Outdoor Recreation Plan. It's a requirement for essentially the Forest Service for us to take a pulse of what the Commonwealth's forests look like, and then a plan to move forward. And it's mostly used for funding opportunities, or at least outlining a standardized practice, or at least standardized planning effort across all of the states. So that's the action plan. And that was the State Forest Resource Management Plan. This is what we're starting is our State Forest, or it's the Bureau's strategic plan, which is looking at the Commonwealth's forests. And so we're doing all of the similar planning efforts that John just described. So using public polling, we've been talking to all of our stakeholders, asking some standard questions. We've been also talking with advisory committees. And so we've developed these priority areas that we're going to be looking into a little bit further. And we plan to develop something like Penn's Parks for All, where we're putting out kind of an overview of those priorities, issues, and how to move forward as we develop and work towards that strategic plan. And so that'll be out and available for the public as well. Timing wise, the COVID-19 timeframe has kind of changed our timeline a little bit, but we're hoping to have something towards the end of the year. But what we're looking at for the Commonwealth's forests are things like, and you had mentioned it earlier, Marcy, is the value of trees, communicating and talking with the public about trees and forests and their values, or watershed protection, the ecological side with plants and animal habitat, things like that, are all those values and uses of the forest. So, yeah, a lot of planning efforts. We do a lot of planning here in the Bureau, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, planning is important, especially when you're managing such a large resource.
For sure.
With a lot of moving parts. As we're talking about forests, I don't know that many people know that Pennsylvania's forests are certified sustainable. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's a real kudos to the management of our state forests.
Yes, I'm happy to talk about that. I really do like the certification process, and that our state forest system are well-managed forests. So we've been certified through FSC for a while now. Oh gosh, and more than 15 years or so. And then last year we just added the certification for SFI, Sustainable Forestry Initiative. And my brain just blanked there. And what those two certification systems do is basically there's standards that are looked at every single year with third-party certifiers to ensure that we're meeting these environmental, social, and forestry sustainability parameters. And it actually is a really great process to go through. And already these standards are built into our management, but it is a really kind of beneficial way to sit with auditors and talk through some of those management challenges and what those best ways to do that are, and build those into our management. And it's also a way that folks and the public can see that we are managing their forest, and the reports are out on that website, and that information details those standards outside of what's in the State Forest Resource Management Plan. But then we also have those standards that are outlined in both FSC and SFI. So yeah, we're pretty excited to now be a dual certified system.
Yeah, congratulations. That somehow missed my radar. I didn't realize that you were dual certified now.
Yeah,
that's very good news.
Yeah, and it certainly provides a benefit for the wood products coming off of the forest. There is a demand for those certified products to ensure that whatever that product is coming from a well-managed forest.
Yes, I know when we do any printing through PPFF, we're always looking for paper that has been certified. So it was well managed, because we all have a role in the stewardship.
For sure. Yeah. And my kids now know what to look for on the back of the tissue box. And
oh, excellent.
Like yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that what PPFF does is we engage volunteers, and we have friends groups in both parks and forests. And there's also the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources Conservation Volunteer Program. Can each of you talk for just a minute about the role of volunteers in state parks and state forests?
Certainly, I can start, and incredibly important to be quick and succinct there. We really count on our volunteers. I've always stated that it's the highest form of visitation. It's a greater connection to the resource and to the values that the resources provide. And they do everything, Marcy, as you know, across the board. It's everything from assistance with maintenance to pulling off large events, and providing environmental education. The Conservation Volunteer Program allows people to move into that realm of volunteerism to the area that they want, and really lift up things that we would not be able to lift up on our own with professional staff. So it is a vital and critical and irreplaceable part of how we operate in the Commonwealth and state parks with our volunteers and our friends groups. Close, I would say intimate, as you know, relationships that last a long time, that bring great value to our public lands.
It's a great way for people that are park and forest enthusiasts to give back to their park or forest.
Absolutely, and I just want to put a shout out. I know maybe Ellen mentioned it on a previous StreamYard thing, but I know that during the COVID emergency, volunteers, friends groups jumped in, and they put together masks when we were facing a severe personal protective equipment issue at the beginning of this emergency, and it was greatly appreciated. Not only making the masks, but getting them shipped out and distributed to the locations that we needed the most. Greatly appreciated, and it meant a lot to all of us on the professional side to receive that gift from our volunteers.
Well, you're quite welcome. They people were very enthusiastic, because these parks and forests are very special to them, and they also know how hard our park and forest staff work to make sure that they're having a quality experience. So they were happy to be able to give back. So Ellen, what in a state forest, what is the role of a volunteer?
And John did a really great job, and I agree completely with his comments, and so I second those. But I guess an additional item I'll add is, and you kind of were getting at that, Marcy, is not only are the volunteers, they're doing it for them because they love the forest or the park, and they want to make sure that where they're going is the experience they're looking for, but they're doing it for a lot of people. And I think that's what's so great, is they are putting their efforts and their time and efforts and work and love into these areas for others to enjoy, and for others to enjoy into the future. And I think that those are those valuable pieces, when you show up to a special park or forest and you think, gosh, thank goodness somebody decided to work to maintain this or preserve this as a forest or park. And it's just the same thought that I have with those folks volunteering their time. I mean, they're doing this for them and for many, many others. And that love of those resources is just really appreciated. And it's amazing that people are thinking about that better, greater good to make sure that we have these resources and that they're taken care of well. And that's awesome. And I think that that's just the greatest value. And and when you guys helped make that mask, you can really feel the love from that. But then also, you really feel the love from folks spending the time for those future access to these resources. So it's just great. They're invaluable. So it's much appreciated.
You're quite welcome. And I know a lot of the volunteers, whether they're with a friends group or they're a conservation volunteer, they're very committed to working alongside of state park and state forest staff. And speaking of park and forest staff, park and forest are receiving a lot of visitation. What can visitors do to make it a little bit easier on park and forest staff? Any suggestions on how to be a good park or forest visitor?
Well, sure. I would say I'd start with come prepared. I know at least there are some people getting out into parks and forests that maybe have not been avid hikers. They aren't, avid swimmers or whatever it is. So the preparation, I think, is important, making sure that you have those resources. And, now all the restrooms are open, so you shouldn't have to pre-plan as much in that respect. But I think it is important to pre-plan and make sure that you're prepared for the conditions of the trail or whatever you're going to do in that park or forest, but then also have a backup plan just in case you get there and it is packed and the parking lots are full, and so you can move on to your next park or forest choice. But preparation, I think, is a good thing.
Okay, great. John, would you like to share some thoughts?
Sure. In alignment with what Ellen mentioned about preparation, I think it's part of that preparation is that they should be aware of the additional protocols and guidance that we're messaging on all channels to keep themselves as well as our staff safe and to take care of the resource and protect the resource. I think we have a wealth of information. We're continuing to put information out via social media or online or through press releases, as well as on site at parks and forests. And if they follow that guidance and under this extraordinary situation that we find ourselves in with COVID, that would be the best benefit for our park staff and our forest staff.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. And I might also suggest pack a little patience.
Yes.
Have that in your backpack as well. Be a little more forgiving and have a little bit of patience. You may not get into where you want to be, or things might take a little bit longer. But we're all in this together, and we're all working through new ways of working and adapting. So if we can all pack a little patience in our day pack or our beach bag or whatever it is that we're carrying, that would be really helpful as well.
That's always a good message, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's not cliche to say we are all in this together, and we've been saying it a lot, almost daily. It feels, and certainly with our staff, they understand that when people are showing up on the park, they're probably under some duress or some level of stress, and so that is taken into account as we move through our interactions and provide the service that we do.
Yes, very, very good observation. Well, we're nearing the end of our time, but I wanted to give each of you an opportunity to say any final thoughts or any final information that you'd like to share with the viewers. So Ellen, if you would like to go first, and any final thoughts, words of wisdom?
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, you had that wonderful one with patience. Final thoughts? Yeah, no, I would just thank you very much. Appreciate you focusing on parks and forests, and I know you're finishing up your week here, and appreciate everybody's interest in forests and parks, and hopefully folks are preparing as they're moving out into the forest this weekend and throughout the summer. And we look forward to the strategic planning process coming up over the next few months, and really talking about how to manage and conserve our Commonwealth forests for the next decade or so. But no, that's the extent of my thoughts. But thank you for this time, Marcy.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here. John?
Yes, thanks, Marcy. Thanks to PPFF for the opportunity to be on the Lunch and Learn series. It's been a pleasure having this discussion today. I think, as far as parting words, I will echo the patience, Marcy, that you counseled there. I think patience and coupled with patience is consideration when you're coming to the parks and forests to recreate. That there needs to be consideration to the other visitors as well as the staff as we go through this challenging time. It's so important for our visitors to be able to access the parks and forests, and we're so happy to be able to host and have very little interruption in public access to our public lands. But certainly patience and consideration during this time needs to be in the forefront.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank both of you for being here, and I also want to thank all of your staff, because I know they're working very hard, and they're always working very hard to make sure that our state lands are very well cared for and are providing an opportunity for visitors, and while also protecting the ecological resources that they are. So thank you to you and your teams, and thank you for folks for joining us today. We only, I think, scratch the surface of parks and forests, because there's so much you could talk about. So perhaps at another point in time we can have you back so we can dig a little bit deeper into some other things as it relates to park and forest. But thank you both. Have an enjoyable weekend. And if you want to stay on, I'm going to end the broadcast. And thank you, everybody. And I didn't see any other questions that I didn't relate, but if you have a question that you would like to post, we would be sure to get it to John or Ellen to make sure that your question is answered. So thank you both, and thank you, viewers.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.